Napoli fans around the world, welcome to Napoli Talk. Guys, we are finally talking about Napoli again because President Aurelio de Laurentiis has officially ended Napoli's press blackout yesterday by announcing a million different things. I mean, this press conference covered so many different topics, except maybe going into detail about the one that we cared about the most, which was what happened during Napoli Verona, the final game of the season. Guys, I made a meme about it on Instagram. If you are not following official Napoli Talk on Instagram, what are you doing? So anyways, in this video, we'll be uncovering and unpacking everything that he said, and we're going to follow along the words that he said. I'm going to read them out, but also there's going to be a few things out there that I'm going to summarize because obviously I'm not going to make a 2-hour video, so it'll be much shorter than his press conference, but a lot of interesting takes, so let's have a look together about what he actually said. So let's start with Napoli Verona, and Aurelio De Laurentiis says, this is the only thing he says about it: "It was a great disappointment. I went to the locker room to stir the team on at halftime. I was pleased to see the goal we scored, but I was not pleased to see the draw." I mean, guys, that is the most basic thing you could say about any football match in the history of football matches. I was pleased when we scored, and then I was not so pleased when we didn't win the game. That's all he has to say about that game. That's it. And he continues saying, "In a dinner in Di Maro or Castel di Sangro," which is where Napoli does their retreat, "it is a conversation that I will want to have with the players, with answers that will not arrive in the sense that you want." That again is just so mysterious and does not give any satisfaction to the fans about what happened. And what does that mean, that I will have answers that it's not what you want to hear? I mean, yeah, this is just the most mysterious thing in the past 50, 100 years. I mean, this is more mysterious than, are there aliens? Who killed Kennedy? Why your dad left you? Who let the dogs out? And then this comes along. What happened in Napoli Verona? I mean, these are the top 5 biggest mysteries in the world. And I think it's going to remain that way for quite some time. So let's go on to then what he had to say about Gattuso. So he says, they ask him actually, was there any intention to sack Gattuso before the end of the season? And he said, "I had to ask myself what happens if the situation would escalate. I called Spalletti to ask for his availability, and he said he was, if it was necessary, but in the end, it wasn't." The ex-players and old friends of Gattuso interviewing him in the studios wanted the scoops, and in order to avoid ruining a relationship between the club and the coach, the press blackout was put in place. But I did that only after hearing inappropriate things. It was best to put a stop to it. So strong words, and it gets stronger, guys. They ask him before Napoli Verona, the last game of the season, did you hesitate to confirm Gattuso? Because remember, we weren't sure whether Gattuso was going to renew or not with Napoli, depending on if he reached Champions League football. And this is what he had to say. "No, before the match I was with Lombardo," which is Napoli's head of communications, "and taking the Champions League for granted. I had prepared a message to release about Gattuso to wish him well with the club he had to go to. Barone of Fiorentina," he's a sporting director of Fiorentina, "asked me to write a few lines that shed him in good light for him. Then once the game ended and we drew the match, we looked at each other and we said we could not send that greeting, so we made it shorter and to the point." I mean, this is a big headline, the fact that no matter what happened, whether Napoli would get into the Champions League or not, his fate was set. He was going to quit. Not only that, but Gattuso had already an agreement with Fiorentina, and that's honestly quite bad, because maybe that influenced how much he cared about this game, knowing that he was going to leave Napoli at the end of it anyways. And then what's really striking also is the fact that Fiorentina asked Napoli to put out a press release shedding Gattuso in good light before they would announce him. I mean, this is crazy. One team asking another team to do good PR for them. So it's a really good insight of what happens behind the scenes between clubs. But it gets even more, I guess, interesting As he continues speaking, he says, "The fact of sacking Gattuso dates back to last summer. I wanted to do it last year, but there was no time. The season ended so late and there was the new one starting soon. I had chosen Gattuso as a temporary replacement for Ancelotti's exit. Even if he had won the championship, his mission would have ended. Unfortunately, we lost games that we shouldn't have lost, and we won others when we would have had problems. This imbalance without continuity was a confirmation that I had to stop that collaboration at some point, even if we had reached the Champions League." This is massive. This is telling us that if we didn't have COVID that would extend the 2020 season, 2019-2020 season, into the middle of the summer, then basically Gattuso would have been sacked, because Napoli would have had a normal retreat, a normal preseason where they would have had all the time in the world with a new coach to start a new chapter. Instead, because the season ended so late and the new one was starting very soon after that, Napoli thought, you know what, it's best to just stay with Gattuso. The players know him. We know what he wants from the transfer market, and let's just continue with that. And then he has a dig at Gattuso, saying, "One thing that annoyed me is the substitutions. We have 5 changes available and you can only put players on in the last 10 minutes. Are you kidding me? You let my guys play for 5 minutes when you made me invest millions in them, saying you believed in them. If we hadn't let those players play only 5 minutes, we would now have the opportunity to give them a higher value and perhaps sell them rather than some more established players." So what he's saying here is, listen, Gattuso, you made me buy certain players. And I'm thinking in this case, Petagna. I'm thinking in this case, Lobotka. And you barely played them. I mean, yes, we saw Petagna when Mertens and Osimhen were injured. But then after that, they never came on. And before their injury, Petagna never really came on, only in the last 5 minutes. So, and you know, Lobotka, we never really saw him. And what De Laurentiis is trying to say is, look, man, if you had given them more time, then we would have been able to give them a certain value in this transfer market, you know, and say, you know what, Lobotka's worth 15 million. And with those 15 million, we could have sold them. And, you know, instead of selling maybe Fabian or Koulibaly or whoever they might be thinking of selling, he's saying, look, I could have sold these guys, but instead, because they basically did not play at all, I can't even sell them for anything. You know, they're not even worth 2 bananas. And then this leads into the transfer market. So he talks a bit about that. And he says, I haven't spoken to Insigne about his renewal. I didn't want to throw him off before the Euros. That's really all he says about Insigne. Then he says, the real problem at Napoli is not that we missed the Champions League. It's the salaries that went up from 30 to 156 million euros in recent years. We might need to sell players to reduce this wage bill. There's at least 2 purchases I shouldn't have done because of COVID, but I was too optimistic. On the other hand, my sponsor started saying, I know we have a contract, but I can't follow through with it. At that point, you breathe, don't get mad, suffer, and try to push forward. So a lot to unpack here. Basically, okay, so Insigne, we're not going to have any news about him in the next few days and weeks, probably only in the summer. And I think it's something that they'll want to settle as quickly as possible when they get back in the retreat. And I think they will find a compromise, but it's about whether Insigne is going to accept maybe a lower salary than what he's on now, or at most the same salary that he's on now, because there's a huge wage issue at Napoli, is what he's saying. He's saying the wages have gone up too much, 156 million euros. That is obviously very little compared to some of the top European teams, but obviously Napoli doesn't make as much money as some of those other top European teams. And you have to think that 156 million euros, you know, for every million euros that a player earns, Napoli has to put aside double that, because half of that gets taken away in taxes. So, you know, Napoli's putting in a lot of money into wages, and there's some people out there with really high wages, and that's, for example, Koulibaly with 6 million, Mertens with over 4 million, Insigne with 4 million, Lozano as well has a high salary. And so I think these players are all at risk of maybe being sold. And he says something later on in the interview which basically says, hey, look, guys, I mean, anyone has a price, and with the right price, anyone can go. And with regards to the 2 purchases I shouldn't have done because of COVID, now that's really interesting because COVID hit February 2020, and since then we've only had a few transfer markets, and we didn't really buy anyone in the winter, in the recent winter. So the only people that we bought were people last summer, and the only ones I can remember are Osimhen, Bakayoko, and who else did we buy? Can't really remember who else we bought, but those are really the only 2 people that we bought. So what is he saying? Is that he shouldn't have bought Osimhen? I mean, what other transfers because of COVID do you actually regret? If he's talking about Osimhen, that's a big scoop. But again, it's not explicit, and maybe he's saying, look, I could have tried to get him on loan instead of buying. Not that he doesn't actually want the guy, but it's interesting that he's saying I shouldn't have done certain type of investments. It's interesting to know that he could be talking about Osimhen at that point. Anyways, he continues saying, we'll decide with the coach from the 1st of July who we could sell, and based on the players we sell, it'll determine what we can do coming in. So guys, don't expect Napoli, when the transfer market opens, to start buying players. We first need to sell, and based on that, we will buy. We might not receive any crazy offers, but hopefully we do. Everyone has a price. So, if someone comes in with 60 million for Fabian Ruiz or Koulibaly, or maybe 40 million for Insigne, then I think De Laurentiis is going to sell. And he's saying the fans might not agree. You guys are not going to like this. He says the fans might not agree, but they're not the ones that have to keep the balances of the club healthy. They just want to win and have no entrepreneurial or business logic. Now, that's not going to sit well with the fans. I mean, I know what he's talking about because I think the majority of fans do think that way. They just want Napoli to win, spend a lot of money. I don't think every fan is like that. I'm not like that. I've, in fact, defended how Napoli operates in the transfer market because I don't want to see them have millions and millions and millions of euros of debt, because ultimately I think in the long run that's going to penalize you. And we've seen what has happened to Napoli in the past when they went in debt. We failed as a club and had to start from 3rd, 4th division. So I don't want that to happen again. But basically what he continues saying that, having said that, the goal for next year remains to get back in the Champions League. So even though we might sell Fabian, we might sell Koulibaly, all these type of players, no matter what, the goal is still Champions League football. So it's not like we're trying to now say, let's become a mid-table team and sell everyone off and we don't have any ambition. It's about, no, let's still try to be in the top 4 for next season. And he says, another thing, all these investments that we do, FIFA doesn't protect us. They use our players, and if they get injured in World Cups or Euros and their value goes down to 0, or we can't use them for several months, do we get any recompensation? No, they say it's not their problem. There is the story about Napoli not letting Fabian represent Spain in the Olympics in July. I say that is not my problem. I'm totally on this with De Laurentiis, because clubs put in, you buy Osimhen, let's say, for 80 million. That's a lot of money. And then he goes to Nigeria to play with Nigeria, as he should, but he gets injured. He injured his shoulder and he was out for 3 months. And, at that point you think, well, surely FIFA has to compensate in some way. I mean, Napoli made a huge investment, and this guy, for external circumstances due to FIFA, is out for 3 months, and that penalizes Napoli massively. And there's some players that have career-ending injuries when playing international football, and FIFA just doesn't do anything about it, and all of a sudden all the money you invested is just gone because of FIFA. And I think that's true, that they have to do something. And with regards to Fabian not letting him go to the Olympics in July, I mean, yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, Fabian has had a really long season. He's playing the Euros. There's no reason why Napoli should let him go to the Olympics. We need to prepare for the season that's coming ahead, and make sure he doesn't get injured in case we need to sell him. I think the Olympics should be with people that are maybe not playing in World Cups and Euros, so you give other players a chance to represent their countries. But going on, another topic that us fans really want to know about is shirts. So he starts off in a bit of a tangent saying you have to do things differently at times. At one point this year, I bought an ice cream company. I was making a movie because, as you know, De Laurentiis is a movie producer. Because I was making a movie and that company was not happy with the product placement of the ice cream in the shot. I didn't agree, so I bought the company. Big moves. And with that mindset, I told myself I'll make the Napoli shirts myself. Everyone says I'm crazy. The timeline is just not there. Nike, Adidas require 18 months notice to make the shirt in time. How are you going to do it in less time yourself? How are you going to find someone to design and produce the shirts in time? And he just says, well, I just do it. It could not work economically, as in, there is a risk it might not work. But at least I tried to do something unique. We will do a press conference with Emporio Armani when I have samples. It takes 60 days for the shirts to arrive from China, including customs. We might present them in the retreat in the second week of August. So, guys, big news is the fact that he bought an ice cream company. No, I'm kidding. Big news is the fact that we finally officially announced Emporio Armani as the designer of Napoli shirts. And that's wild for me because I just can't wait to see how good these shirts will look like. And Napoli in recent years, and especially in the last maybe 12 months, has done incredible steps towards being a more international and international brand, and branching out in the commercial world. I mean, we have that new partnership with Konami. So our training center might be renamed to Konami, but Konami is huge in Japan. And for the gamers out there, we've done that collaboration with Marcelo Burlon, those shirts, which were, I think, so sick in my opinion. And now we're in collaboration with Emporio Armani. These are big, big brands. And Napoli is, now trying to produce the shirts themselves, basically saying to Nike and Adidas, we don't need you. We'll make the shirts in China. We'll sort out the logistics with Amazon. And we don't need that middleman. And basically, that hopefully will allow Napoli to make more profit with these shirts. And yeah, they're being really entrepreneurial. And I really, really like that aspect. As I said, it might not work, but at least we're trying something. I'd rather have shirts designed by Armani than Nike or Adidas, is my opinion. Especially because the Nike and Adidas ones, they don't let you be creative with them. They, Nike and Adidas have their designers that are working for 20 different teams. They're going to try to give the same sort of sample or the same sort of design to everyone and just change some colors around. Whereas if you're the only one working with Emporio Armani, Armani is going to make something just for you. And that's pretty cool. Then he talks about the Super League and he says, Florentino was right that we needed to balance the books, but his format is wrong. You have to take the top 5 leagues and put the top 5-6 teams in there to make them play a league of 30 on the weekdays. Now, the interesting thing is that he says the league of 30 means 29 games, playing each team only once. So obviously, it could be that you play, let's say, Liverpool at Napoli. And so you might think, oh, that's a disadvantage to Liverpool because they have to play you at Napoli, but you don't play them back at home. But it balances out because then Liverpool maybe only has to go play Madrid at Anfield instead of playing Madrid at Madrid. So you're gonna get situations where some teams are playing some teams only once at home and other teams only once away, and more or less things balance out. So 30 teams means 29 games, but actually you wouldn't play against teams in your own national league. The result from your national league is carried over, so then it's just about 23 games. So basically, if we have to play Napoli-Juve, instead of playing them for the third time that season, we just take the result from the National League and carry that over into the European League. So that's 23 games. I still think that's a lot of games. I mean, a normal Europa League or Champions League run is only about 15, 16 games if you reach, the semis, the final. So playing 23 adds many more games. That's a very congested season, and you have to remember that not every team usually gets to the final or semifinals. Only a handful of teams, whereas in this case you have 30 teams all playing 23 games. It's a lot of games, so maybe that has to be revised as well and limited a bit more, maybe to 25 teams to start with. We'll see. And then he talks about the youth team and the youth sector, and he's saying we can't invest in a great youth team here because when parents have to choose between sending their kid to either Naples or a club in Rome or northern Italy, they would always choose the other one because it gives the kid more opportunities in life in case he doesn't make it as a footballer. Now, I disagree with that because let's say you're a 14-year-old kid. What would be the problem in if Napoli really had the facilities that could guarantee this kid is going to have the best chance of becoming a footballer? I don't think anyone would say, you know what, I don't want to send my kid there. And because with the whole thing about the later opportunities in life, I mean, the guy's 14, right? If he doesn't make it as a football player by the time he's 17, 18, I mean, he can just move. I mean, if the parents think there's more opportunities up in the north, well, when you're 17, 18, you can just move north and go to university in the north. I mean, no one's telling you have to stay all your life in Naples. So I think this is just an excuse for De Laurentiis not to invest. I think he could have come up with better excuses, but hey. And then he talks about corruption in football and two aspects. So the first one is they ask him about allowing coaches, or his opinion on allowing coaches to call some VAR calls. And he says, I've been saying it for the last 2 years, but Italy is a country where higher powers exist. And that's a big statement, saying that basically they wouldn't change that rule in Italy because the refereeing association has a lot of power, or there's certain higher powers that want to regulate the refereeing decisions. And obviously if you let coaches call VAR calls, then a ref has to review a particular situation, whereas without that, the ref can always be like, oh, well, I don't think I need to review that, and that affects football matches. And then the second thing he says is there's a book written by an ex-football agent. He talks about a 500 billion euro black market of football bets. It links Italy, Mexico, and Singapore and affects football all over Europe. You could decide presidential elections with that amount of money. Imagine what you can do in football with it, but no one talks about this. And this is a book written in like 2007, 2018 by an ex-agent, and he basically has the names, dates, and matches that he thinks were affected by football bets, and he's done this whole reconstruction and investigation about where the money was coming from, how much it was. And he's basically saying, like, look, man, like, the information is out there. Why are people not investigating more? Because this is a huge, substantial amount of money. And, I agree with that. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes in football that needs to be cleared up. So, But, guys, if you've got any comments on what he had to say, what I've had to say, put that down in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And if you've liked this video, then go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe. And as always, Forza Napoli sempre.